We have formed a quorum, and I'll call the meeting to order. You have received the agenda. So item number 1, confirmation of minutes, paper CP4 764-1314. Minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of April 2014 have been sent to members. So far, no proposed amendment has been received. If members have none to propose here, may I invite members to confirm the minutes? Okay, thank you. Item 2, information papers issued since the last meeting. There are 6 of them. The details can be found on the agenda. I won't repeat the information. Yes, Dr. Kenneth Chan. Some of the papers are issued by me, so I will be brief. I would like to make some brief remarks. Regarding St. Margaret Girls' College, the government has provided a response, but there are further information arising from a meeting we have just had with the students, so we will be providing further information. And also the 5th letter is about the Secretary for Education's remarks on the Occupy Central movement. And I wonder if the Secretary is trying to issue guidelines to schools concerning the movement. I would like to get some more accurate information from the Secretary. At least he should say and tell us whether he's going to issue a guideline or not. The next meeting will be held on the 14th of July. It is a Monday at 4:30. That will be the last meeting of this current legislative year. We have 4 items that we would like to discuss. So for the next item, we'll have to extend the meeting up to 7 p.m. There are 4 items. The first one is proposed by the administration, and that is the electronic enrollment platform for DSE students under the multiple pathway arrangement, and also the professional support for the teaching of Chinese language as a second language as the framework. And I have also proposed 2 items, and that is the progress of the free kindergarten education committee. We'd like to get some updating of the progress from the committee. And we also want the government to brief us on the arrangement to allocate additional student numbers to the S1, and also in relation to the policy on small class teaching, latest progress and follow-up action matters. Members, please also refer to the list of outstanding items. And I've looked at the list with the Deputy Chairman. We believe the 4 of them can be deleted temporarily. And they are: first, long-term planning and policy on education; second, employment and opportunity for young teachers; and the third one, provision of financial assistance to post-secondary students; and the fourth one, the grievance procedure of the University Grants Committee funded institutions. We don't want the list to be too long and unwieldy. Of course, you can propose to have them put back on the list afterwards. We have a limited time. Now, if you have questions about the proposed deletion, we can answer your question questions in writing. Now we move on to the first item on the agenda, or fourth item on the agenda, the 4th strategy on information technology in education. May I remind members that under Rule 83A of our Rules of Procedure, if a member has a direct or indirect pecuniary interest related to the items under discussion, the nature of such an interest should be disclosed before he speaks. And this is a paper 765/1314 That's a background brief. May I invite the Secretary for Education to join us now? Thank you for your attendance. Secretary, please walk us through your paper briefly. Thank you, Chairman. On the 7th of May 2014, the Education Bureau released the consultation document on the 4th Strategy on Information Technology in Education, ITE4, for a 2-month consultation. And this is focus on student learning. We propose something comprehensive to leverage on the potential of IT in education and in interactive learning so as to enhance and facilitate students to learn how to learn. We have come up with 5 actions in a comprehensive manner. First, enhancing schools' IT infrastructure and re-engineering the operational mode in learning. Second, Action 2, enhancing the quality of e-learning resources. Action 3, renewing curriculum, transforming pedagogical and assessment practices. And Action 5, building professional leadership capacity and communities of practice, and the emphasis is on practice. Action 5, how to involve parents, stakeholders, and the community. Before the consultation document was issued, we have been liaising closely with stakeholders. And in January 2014, we launched the support scheme to schools. The schools have reacted very warmly to this. The 100 schools have started their first stage of upgrading their IT infrastructure facilities. The experience has been very useful in launching further measures. In May, 8 open briefing sessions have been conducted, and the participants involved include students, teachers, computer associations, and the relevant stakeholders. They all support the direction for the e-learning, which tally with the views we collected previously. Many stakeholders, however, have made suggestions with regard to the strategy which have been set out in the paper.
We hope members will give us views on the proposed actions so that we can improve on the implementation details. Also, to launch the various measures in a timely manner, I hope members will support our application to the FC for an amount of $105 million so that we can provide $90 million for schools to buy mobile computers. And as you said, members, you also like us to provide this to 900 schools. And also through the Hong Kong Education City, we can provide $10 million worth of funding to open more resources, and also $5 million dollars for other support measures, including supporting teachers and also organizing seminars. We'll continue to collect views during the consultation period. After that, we will collect views and consider them so we can improve the strategy and implement the measures. Thank you, Chairman. Members who would like to speak? Those who have raised their hands are Michael Tian, Yip Kin Yun, Fernando Zhang, Kenneth Chan, Peter Zhang, Starry Lee. 6 members. Three minutes each, including a reply. Michael Tian. Thank you, Chairman. The ITE 4 includes a vision but little substance. You are saying you like to realize IT potential, unleash learning power, but I don't seem to see anything new. You talk about buying tablets, installing Wi-Fi. This is just superficial. In order to increase interaction so that students will not be spoon-fed anymore. I have talked to experts about this, Chairman. They said that now teachers talk and students listen. This is very passive. They say it should be changed totally into student-led learning. That is for students to ask questions and for teachers to answer questions. This is not new in the US, and some teachers in Singapore are already doing this. We only have this as supplementary teaching. But I'm talking about turning the classroom upside down. And there should not be lectures in the classrooms only, but students should not just do homework at home, but students should learn basic knowledge at home, and then in the classroom they should try to do problem solving in small groups. This can be very easy. You should produce clips on what you're going to teach in the next lesson, and usually it is a lesson of 40 minutes. You can put it together in a clip of 20 minutes and put it on the website. Students will watch them and then they will write notes, and you don't have to repeat this in classrooms. I had such a hard time when I was small. I had to copy notes and then recite and do rote learning. And in classrooms, students should only have in-depth discussion. This has been done in the US, but it has to be promoted by the administration. My question for you is, since you have IT and such convenience, it will not be difficult for you to produce such clips. So will you really seriously consider turning the classroom upside down? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Tian. Thank you, Chairman. This is also the focus of our proposal. In point 3, we say we want to transform pedagogical and assessment practices, and that is we encourage students to use technology as a tool. And we cited an example in the consultation document, like in a biology lesson, students will go on field trips, they will film plants in a park, and then they will come back to have small group discussions. This is what we encourage them to do. No, what I mean is you should not have the teacher talk and students listen, but rather students ask and teachers answer. Will you implement that? In the promotional effort, we will allow the management and teachers in schools to start to accept this. Thank you. Next one, Deputy Chairman, Mr. Ip Kin Yun. I think Mr. Michael Tian's point is very meaningful and it's worthy of our further thoughts. IT education is not just to provide the hardware by providing tablets, for example, or making use of students' own tools and devices. But in fact, we like to bring about a total change in the way we teach so we can have different results. In fact, the paper has just touched on the surface in this aspect. If we want to turn this into a program, this paper does not provide enough information. And if you go deeper into it, it will certainly have an impact on the way teachers work. The teachers might have a much bigger workload. The secretary said you would take students on a field trip and allow them to video the environment, but Mr. Michael Tian is saying that teachers should first of all produce the educational clips. This will have such a big impact on the flow of work, and there will be also an impact on resources. My question is, this consultation is just like asking about the framework. It is more or less the same kind of consultation with the constitutional development package. After this, I believe the Bureau will really have to come up with a detailed option or proposal. After that, will there be another consultation? So my question is there going to be a second round of consultation? If not, we are going to speak just on the framework. And in the end, we'll not be able to speak on the actual strategy. My second question is more concrete. Many schools have told us that they do not like one-off funding. They think there should be an IT coordinator in schools. 92% of schools wanted an IT coordinator. Will you have new thinking then, Mr. Secretary? Thank you, Chairman. After collecting views, we will again consult everybody when we try to put together a concrete proposal. There have been 100 schools which pioneered the program. And as you know, if we go for the subscription mode, the technical support will be included, and this is possible. Next one, Fernando Zhang. Chairman, helping teaching and learning with IT will always be supported by us. I am more concerned about special education needs students, including those who are disabled, and also students in special schools. This so-called ITE 4 in the paper you mentioned SEN students will be supported, but I'm still not sure how the support will be given. Say 18, you talk about non-Chinese speaking students and top performing students, and also other students. But for disabled students, you should use assistive technology. If they are visually impaired, you should have books that can produce sounds. And also for those who are physically disabled, you can also try to help them communicate. There are other different kinds of learning difficulties, and there is assistive technology for that. $150 million. I can see that most of it is going to be spent on tablet computers. I cannot see how this strategy can help SEN students. Or is it that the Secretary can tell me there are other resources, particularly for SEN students, that there will be dedicated funding for assistive technology? If indeed that's the case, please let me know. Can I defer to the Deputy Secretary, Dr. Chan? Well, actually, in ITE 2, we have already included a requirement for special aid for SEN students, and also top quality IT materials will also cover this. And this time around, we actually welcome students' schools' application for anything they need to help SEN students. What do you mean? You mean a special requirement? Does it mean that whether it be the hardware or software or the website, is it that all that will be barrier-free? But what about the resulting material and the technology? Would that be dedicated, especially made for SEN students? Because those are really different things. Kenneth Chan, in universities, we laugh at ourselves. We produce PowerPoints, but they have power without, but not a point. Well, I think this is related to what members said about pedagogy. When we go for Wi-Fi, when we go for supporting teaching with computers, and you first of all read your textbooks at home, etc. All that has to do with pedagogy. So yes, we support this basic direction of providing the fundamental devices. However, how will that this bring about an improvement in pedagogy? But in this paper, we cannot see any clear direction about improving teaching. Can I ask some specific questions? Earlier on, 100 schools have been taking part in the pioneering program, and there are 900 more. At that time, remember, we had such a heated discussion as to whether there will be a so-called wealth gap among schools, because only elite schools will be able to spearhead the project, and no other schools can take part. Now you add 900 other schools, but you don't include a timetable or roadmap here in the paper. Can you let us know the timetable here? And secondly, in the paper, it is said that you encourage schools to buy services from the private market or rent services for that matter. Secretary, do you know how many such service providers are there in the market which can serve schools? And also, have you looked at their service conditions, whether the competition is there in the market so that there will be real choice for schools? Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Sherman to answer the question? The member asked for a timetable and roadmap for the remaining 900 schools. Starting from the academic year 2015-16, schools can gradually promote Wi-Fi learning according to their stage of preparedness. During the consultation, schools have told us that we should not hurry them on. So it really depends on how well they are prepared for the launch. We can, for example, give them 5 years, but this will be decided by schools. You mean the money is there, and the schools can make a decision as to when to apply for the funding, and you will just react to their wishes? Yes, that's correct. Number 2, the procurement of services. The 100 pioneer schools are doing the tendering. After the bids come back, we'll be able to know how many service providers are there for the schools. Different members are continuing to raise their hands, but I have to draw a line. We also have Peter Chang, Starry Lee, Charles Smock, Elizabeth Quat, Sid Ho, Lam Tai Fai. Before you draw the line, I think there is only just Hutchison Wang Pao which can provide the service, and I am worried. Peter Chang, I think Michael Tian made a very good point, but we should not do it only when we have more IT. You can do it now.
Okay.
Students can get prepared, and when they go back to school, they can ask questions. I think the Education Bureau must be, first of all, bold enough before schools can be persuaded to do this. Don't just rely on the schools to take the lead. And also, what about students from families with limited means and their needs, because they tend to lose on the very beginning, and their computer is so slow, they may not be able to use certain software. When they surf the net, it's very slow. If they want to go to Hong Kong Education City, they may not be able to download certain contents. So how can you help them upgrade their software and hardware. I'll ask PAS, Miss Jenny Chan, to respond. Students from families with limited means, they will get some resources to learn, to use IT for learning and for access to internet services. And we are also arranging for students to log on through a single login account. They will be able to do their homework or do other learning when they are at home. When I know that this is available, but some students and parents do not know this, that this is available, and they may own a computer, but no one is there to teach them how to make the best use of it. So after using a tablet or at school, they are not able to make the best use of their computer at home. To promote the use of IT among students, both in schools and at home, it's important to do publicity that reach parents and schools. We would launch various measures to help students learn at home. Well, I don't think anyone would oppose the idea of releasing the potential of learning through adoption of IT. The question is, can that be done? The Secretary has been very proactive in his remarks. How many of those schools in the pilot scheme have adopted such facilitation measures? Second, about Hong Kong ECL, he said the $10 million will be given to Hong Kong ECL so as to make use to purchase quality e-learning resources. Yes, from some parents I've learned that Hong Kong ECL has been very helpful, but the schools opt to be involved in the trial scheme. Can the resources, e-learning resources of Hong Kong ECL be open to all schools and parents? Because some schools have not opted to join the trial scheme. I believe the resources should be shared by all. May I refer this to Mr. Sherman? I think I can also take the other question here. Well, the trial scheme will last for 3 years from 2009. And many schools improve their learning through the use of tablets. And some schools use tablets comprehensively. When the students learning groups, they can use tablets in reciting poems and in recording the learning activities. So this is being adopted. And through sharing seminars, the good practices are being promoted to other schools. Apart from the use of tablet, there are also other e-learning processes. For example, electronic assessment, and there are a number of teaching packages being developed. These are the achievements of the trial scheme. As for the 100 pioneer schools, they are now working on the hardware, but they have also submitted a lot of proposals that they will be able to implement after the hardware is ready. Can you open up the resources of Hong Kong ECL to all? Well, they are always open up to all, but some of the resources, such as assessment tools, will only be made available to teachers. Mr. Charles Moore, But there's something new in this fourth strategy. They have different actions, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they have lumped together different action area instead of just infrastructure. Well, this is commendable because we're talking about interrelated elements. Earlier, you asked for funding of the 100 schools, and you also said it's related to the promotion of e-books, and therefore you have secured the participation of 100 schools. So all these policies are interrelated. Time doesn't allow me to go into details in my questions. In the previous panel, we were talking about the enhancement course on IT education. Well, because some come under your purview, some under the OGCIO. On that other panel, we are saying that many schools are not covered by the ITE4, but according to the OGCIO, the students covered by the ITE4 do not get good grades in DSE, or some do not offer such courses, some are not getting high caliber students and so on. So under ITE4, how are you going to attract better, more capable students to be involved in IT education? Thank you, Mr. Mo. In 2013, we have come up with this enhanced IT education course, which is an open course. We welcome the adoption of the latest IT computer technology in learning. For the DSE, the examination is a standard reference assessment, so it's no longer assessed by drawing a curve. We encourage students who are interested in this to be more actively involved. Well, they are saying that they're still teaching languages that I used to learn decades ago when I was a student. Do you have a timetable to update the curriculum? We can adopt this starting from 2014. We have come up with some new modules. We welcome the adoption of such modules. And the new curriculum will be rolled out comprehensively in 2016. When? 2016, in junior secondary forms. I don't have any more time, but let me ask one more question. Training the teacher is instrumental in ensuring success of the new curriculum. Ms. Elizabeth Kwok. A few months ago, the Bureau came to us saying that 100 schools will be provided with Wi-Fi, and we asked very earnestly when the rest would follow suit, and now you want to roll it out comprehensively. It's important to provide them with Wi-Fi. There's a great demand on the part of schools. So I support the early implementation of the new IT strategy. And to follow up a previous question, the use of IT in education has a bottleneck. The biggest bottleneck is not the software or infrastructure, because the government is now committed to provide Wi-Fi to all schools. The biggest bottleneck is with the teachers. In schools where IT is adopted to good benefits, they are in the minority. Perhaps the government can tell us how many schools have been doing a very outstanding job in using IT in education. Among the 900 or 1,000 schools, how many are outstanding in this regard? And as for the rest, which are not doing as well, maybe there has been a problem with leadership by the principals, or whether the teachers have been equipped or trained, or do they have the time to do their job? Because if teaching is already very time-consuming as it is, they may not have time to do learning with IT. And if we are too successful, it's important that you give the right resources to schools. You may have to involve IT professionals in helping teachers in preparing teaching electronic teaching materials, or otherwise the teachers would not be able to do a job up to our standards. Secretary, we hope that under the 5 actions, we would create a new culture. We would promote training of teachers, and we also understand that teachers need a lot of support. So we would organize seminars and offer them with new courses. When we consulted the teachers, they asked us to give them successful cases so that they can learn from others' experience. So we would be offering support to teachers, to the teaching profession as a whole. Thank you. Ms. Sid Ho, and then I myself would ask questions, and that would be the end of this discussion, this part of the discussion. It's important that schools are using IT for education more extensively. The government is flooded with money, so why don't you give all schools the same opportunity to adopt electronic learning? You are going to allow the 50 schools. So on average, $2,000 per unit. So what kind of mobile devices can you purchase with $2,000? Are we talking about just tablets with limited functions? Primary students would just control these tablet by touching the screen. To primary pupils, that will be interesting. But for secondary students, they will not just be talking about manipulating the software through touch screen actions. They should be doing more. And also in the consultation document on e-learning, that's an interesting point. They are very concerned about opening up information. And it's also said that there should be policies and measures to manage devices brought in by students themselves. Or you can change the hardware, but you have to change the mindset. If you think that the free flow of information is a problem, then you are not going to be able to leverage on the maximum benefit of IT. So are you going to prevent students from using their own devices, or are you saying that you should prevent them from access pornographic sites? I think if we want to prevent such behavior, we should do it through the character building and moral education, instead of trying to limit the use of such mobile devices. Let me answer the second question first. This is a point raised by parents and teachers. They want to avoid violence on the internet or even pornographic sites.
This is what parents asked us to do. If this is done in schools, and if they use intranets, then we can have better control. This is really about parent education. You must educate parents to have confidence in their children. If they think students might have a propensity towards violence, then better they should not do corporal punishment on students at home. In the Lam Tai Phai Secondary School, it was one of the first 100 schools. We do not have any particular privilege. It's just that we are prepared in Wi-Fi infrastructure. And next year, in 2015-16, on a gradual basis, the infrastructure will also be installed for another 900 schools. We are still worried. You have given $350,000 to schools for use over 3 years, but then teaching has to go on beyond those 3 years. What is going to happen? You say if it is done well, it will continue, but out of the 1,000 schools in Hong Kong, some will be better than others. But anyway, I'm worried about continuity. Secondly, teaching and learning. I won't object to ITE, but how do you train the teachers? This summer, some teachers have to take part in ITE workshop. They already have a big workload. And number 3, e-textbooks. Even now, for Chinese and mathematics, you have not approved any e-textbooks. Why? Why such slow progress? Can I have answers, please? Yes. I will answer the first part, Chairman. No, my first question was continuity after the 3 years. Yes, Chairman. This is to help schools set up and launch the hardware. And many principals will know that we have recurrent allowances to the tune of $300,000 to $500,000 every year for schools. Secondly, teacher training. Together with the e-learning associations, we would organize courses and exchange meetings for teachers so they can use resources of existing IT companies as for regional exchange. In fact, I have heard this from schools. I hope you will pay attention to this. Number 3, e-textbooks. In the first stage, we first of all have to encourage entities to get involved. This time around, universities have also joined. We will not sacrifice quality. So the first stage, the first batch, would only include certain textbooks, and in the second batch, we'll provide more choices. Okay, that's it for this item. I believe members will not object to the submission of this paper to the FC for funding support. Right, second item, progress of the review of the new senior secondary curriculum and assessment. Are all the officials here? First, can I invite the Secretary, Mr. Ng, to introduce the paper while officials join us. This is paper CB bracket 4765 bracket 03. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to short-term improvements to NSS, they were started in September 2013. And then in October 2013, we have started the NAS medium-term review in order to tackle issues that have to be taken care of in the long term. And the results, first batch of results have been announced on the 15th of April this year. The midterm review will continue, and the last batch of results would be expected by July 2015. In this midterm review, we continue with previous mechanisms and principles, and this will be evidence-based. According to the NAS review timetable, we will continue to have multi-angle, multi-stage consultation. We will also be reviewing the curricula. In focus groups and also from feedbacks from stakeholder groups, we have collected a lot of views. And between January to March 2014, we have conducted a questionnaire with schools, and now we have got the midterm results. in April 2014, we have got over 44,000 participants in our meetings. And we have organized over 160 meetings in order to discuss the issues for midterm review. There will be 4 different areas: 1 Chinese language, 2 Chinese literature, 3 liberal studies, independent inquiry study, and lastly, business, accounting, and financial studies, or BAFS. Apart from the endorsed proposals, the information is also in the paper. There are other issues as well. Say, for example, how we should look at applied learning and also school-based assessment. These are going on, and we'll continue to collect views from stakeholders through different channels. And then, based on views from schools, the Curriculum Development Council and another organization will continue to report to members. If you're interested, I can talk about the proposals of the 4 subjects. I will stop here. Would you like to go into that now? Why don't you take us through that? Yes, thank you, Chairman. On Chinese language, as reported in the media, we are going to introduce 12 classical set texts. In 2015-14, we start to have this in S4, leading to the 2018 Hong Kong DSE examination. And there will be corresponding changes in Paper 1 of the Hong Kong DSE examination. Secondly, Chinese language. Revision of 2 set texts at S4 in 2015-16, leading to the 2018 Hong Kong DSE examination. We explore into the possibility of further streamlining the SBA requirements. And on the liberal studies subject, IES, we adopt a structured inquiry approach with clear guidelines for the conduct of independent inquiry studies. There will be further streamlining arrangements, such as requiring candidates to submit only 1 final report for assessment and cancelling the submission of the process mark. And we will modify the IES assessment framework at S4 in 2014-15, leading to the 2017 Hong Kong DSE examination. Lastly, again, there has been a lot of reporting on this. This is the business, accounting, and financial studies. We'll adopt separate grading and reporting of the subject results for candidates taking different elective modules with effect from the 2015 Hong Kong DSE examination. That is for S6 students in 2014-15, with no change in the curriculum coverage, mode of assessment, or question setting of the papers. We'll closely monitor and review the existing curriculum and assessment framework of the trimmed BAFS curriculum. Final examination to be conducted in 2016, and the implementation of separate grading and reporting of the subject results. In parallel, starting the groundwork for developing the different subjects. The ultimate way forward will be subject to thorough discussion and consultation by the end of 2016, while holding steadfast to the ultimate goals of the senior secondary curriculum under the new academic structure. Any members who are interested in asking a question? We have the Deputy Chairman, Charles Smock. Fernando Zhang, sit ho. Any more? Okay. I will allow you relatively more time then. Okay, first round. 4 minutes, including a reply. Ip Kin Yun. Thank you. The NAS review is closely watched by secondary school teachers, because this will have a big impact on teachers and students as well. When I say impact, I mean both positive and negative impact. I have the following questions. There is a big workload under the NSS curriculum. The sector has put forward this main request, and that is to improve teacher-student ratio. and that is how many teachers there should be for one class. At senior secondary, can we have 1 to 2.3 instead of 1 to 2? This is a very real question, and this has everything to do with the workload under the NSS. But now you only increase the workload without a corresponding matching of resources. If there will be no change to the manpower provision, then some of the work should not be started, like SBA. Many teachers are crying out in pain, but in fact SBA has not been applied to 9 subjects. It is said that these will be started in 2016. Can we not shelve it? If you don't, then both teachers and students will be very negatively impacted upon. Another question. The BAFS concerned group has given us a letter. They would like to know this crucial point. It is said in the paper that you'd like to adopt separate grading and reporting, and you would developing the different subjects. Now they're concerned about this S in brackets. Are you talking about one subject or more subjects? And when will the work start? What is the timetable and what are the objectives? Secretary. Yes, Chairman and Deputy Chairman. Can I ask Ms. Chan to answer? On workload, you will see that during the short-term and medium-term review, we are trying to streamline matters. We have cancelled some topics. On SBA, we are strategically and deliberately streamlining liberal studies, IES, and guidelines are drawn up for teachers so they have a better grasp. If this can operate smoothly, then we may not need SBA for other subjects. If those are similar to IES, can I now ask Dr. Tong to say more because he has set up a working group? Well, apart from liberal studies IES, which has been streamlined vis-a-vis SBA, we have also summarized the work on other subjects. We will go back to different joint subject meetings, and if they can see that SBA has been streamlined for other subjects, then they can come to a view as to how SBA for that particular subject should be rolled out professionally. We'd like to make sure that the workload is copable both for teachers and students. We are starting to do that.
冇錯，莫乃光。
Mr. Charles Mock. Chairman, in the new academic structure midterm review, there's a matter of concern. I saw the Education Bureau colleagues in the ITB panel, and you have heard me about my concern about the IT courses, both in terms of enrollment and the grades they have achieved. It's not covered in the midterm review. I don't know why. Maybe less importance is attached to them, or maybe other subjects have bigger problems. But I would say that this course is changing very fast in terms of the contents to be covered. So what is your assessment of this subject in the NAS? And what policies are there to make improvements if necessary? Secretary, I'll ask Dr. Tong to address this question. In the preliminary review, the subject was covered, For example, the point was made to establish a teachers' network to share knowledge and experience. There was one such exercise last year. Teachers tend to think that the support given is sufficient. So there are no strong views about whether immediate action should be taken. That's why we don't cover this in the midterm review. Not that it's unimportant. Sorry. From what I've heard, it's not just a DSC, but before they have reached DSC level, schools are suffering from resource problems. Teachers are constrained by the time and lack of expertise. Therefore, they cannot really tie in with DSC curriculum. So how can we do a better dovetailing in the primary and the junior secondary levels? It's easier with other subjects such as physics. Deputy Secretary, thank you, Mr. Mark, for your question. In the last item, we already mentioned that in junior secondary grades, we will ask them to launch the new curriculum in 2016. And in the long term, all DSE subjects will develop at their own paces, some faster than others. We'll move ahead with the times and with the development of technology. Next, Dr. Fernando Jiang. Thank you, Chairman. New academic structure and its development are good. We have one fewer examination in secondary education, but those with special educational needs are still facing problems. In the mainstream schools, they have one additional mandatory subject, liberal studies. That is, liberal studies is really a subject based on linguistic competence. Science students have difficulties in reading and writing. So taking the liberal studies as an exam subject presents additional difficulties to them. If you look at the pass rate of science students, it's just 60% for liberal studies. For the non-science student, the passing rate is 90%. So in your midterm review, shouldn't you be looking into the different needs of science students vis-a-vis non-science students? Although under the special education system, we also have a new academic structure. When are you going to make an announcement as regards the new curriculum structure? And is there a linkage with the qualification framework? Dr. Tong? On liberal studies, we have talked to many organizations and the parents organizations on how we can provide a better support. And we would try to moderate our assessment in the HKEAA. And in the past, we might provide additional time for answering the paper. And now we are considering the adoption of software so that they can answer questions orally, and the software will turn it into writing. That may be more desirable resource-wise in the long term. For the IES, we have a streamlined arrangement to take into account different learning abilities of students. And I understand that the Education Bureau is also considering providing more training to teachers so that they can have a better grasp of the new system. Under the new system, they can present they can make presentations not in writing but through multimedia means. As for the moderation for SEN, we are in the 3rd year of doing this, and we are moving towards linking the vocational courses with qualification frameworks. This is related to the last item we discussed, and that is to say we need to adopt more IT and to help SEN students, and we should make sure that the assessment is done in a way that is fairer to SEN. And what about the development of providing senior secondary education to SEN students? Our experts and we have the learning outcome framework for the first time. We have experts helping us with the assessment. Do you have a timetable? From what we've read in the reports, students have achieved improvements in learning and linguistic skills. Mr. Ho, I have a question about Chinese language. Because people don't like to have the curriculum changing all the time. Now you are going to have a 12 classical set texts to be started at S4. But you cannot start from scratch. If you don't build a foundation in the primary levels or junior secondary levels, you are not able to start with a very difficult classical piece from Zhuangzi. So you must give them something like Tang poetry in the primary schools. Yes, we need to learn classical Chinese, but you cannot start from S4. So please tell us whether you are going to provide some classical Chinese education in in primary and junior secondary levels. And what about fiction, classical fiction, which are easier to read? You should not give them such difficult pieces to start with. Now that you have decided to revert to the old curriculum, I'll provide a response, and I'll ask other colleagues to respond. In the past, there were 300 pieces, and the schools were allowed to choose. But there's a body of opinion that if we do not specify some really classical text, then the system is not comprehensive. And that's why there was a seminar, and these 12 were selected by the schools. And the choice was made partly by the participating schools. Deputy Secretary, we have 300 pieces of classical text, and for textbooks that we have approved, 40% of them are classical texts or classical poems for primary schools and junior secondary schools. In that case, please provide us with supplementary information on the foundation in classical Chinese that will be built during the primary and junior secondary levels, and also give some textbooks to the member. Yes, Dr. Chen. I want you to read 劝学 and see if you can read it. Mr. Lee. Okay, I have to press the button. I have a question about Chinese history subject. Many members from different parties have requested that Chinese history should be a mandatory subject for junior secondary forms. According to the paper from the Electoral Secretariat, the Bureau has recommended that schools should adopt the Chinese history as a mandatory subject for junior secondary forms. What's the progress made so far? And also, there's a declining interest to choose Chinese history among the students. What about the situation now? Are we seeing a continuing decline of students choosing Chinese history as a subject? And have you improved the teaching and learning of Chinese history? And how about the grades achieved by the students taking Chinese history in examinations? Well, I have to stress this again. Chinese history is a mandatory subject in junior secondary forms. When people said this is no longer mandatory, I asked whether they did take the subject in the junior secondary forms, and they always say yes. But of course, for 12.5% of these schools have adopted a new approach after some research, and that is they would blend Chinese language Chinese history teaching with Western history teaching. But I have to stress that this is a mandatory subject in junior secondary forms. The second question is on how to improve the teaching. I've attended some consultation forums and conferences. Three problems have been identified by the participants. Sometimes the teaching is considered boring because they talk about the rise and fall of dynasties, and it's difficult to relate it to practical situation. And second, the reference materials are more traditionally favored instead of using modern-day technology. And then there's a third problem of insufficient support given to teachers. So we are going to address these three problems. In the ITE4, we're also going to explore how to make the subject more interesting by adoption of IT. Secretary, time is limited. Can you tell us whether there's a decline, a continuing trend of decline of students taking Chinese history? All the difficulties that you have mentioned were already there when I was a student of Chinese history. Dr. Tong, sorry, I don't have the figures with me. But there is still a downward trend because the number of candidates is declining. So almost all subjects are suffering a decline of the number of candidates. So it's not unique to Chinese history. But what about the proportion? My impression is that it's steady. We don't see a drastic decrease. All right, please provide supplementary information after the meeting. Leung Yu Chung, thank you, Chairman. I want Dr. Tong to confirm this point. Your colleagues have said on various occasions that in 2015, some SEN students may be able to answer scripts orally to take the place of a written script. As for the scope of the curriculum, some teachers are of the view that over a period of 2.5 times, the content is too much and it's difficult to cope, and students are sometimes asked to attend make-up classes during holidays.
Is that really necessary? Why can't you cut down on the curriculum? Frankly speaking, I have taught top-performing and underperforming students. Still, I find that the curriculum is too much. Top-performing students may be able to work faster, but what about the underperformers? Very often, teachers have to give extra lessons during Easter holidays and Christmas holidays, not to enhance the quality of teaching, but it's just that they can't complete the curriculum. Secondly, we just want to test students' natural science and mathematics instead of their language ability. But what about textual mathematical questions? Very often students give up. They don't want to read the mathematical problems in text. Can we do something about that? Secretary. Dr. Tong. Yes, Dr. Tong. With regard to SEN reading liberal studies, can we develop some software by 2015 so that what they say can be turned into the written language? We are doing a research project on this. As I said, we believe we will not be able to complete it by 2015. What? You changed tack? No, we already said that. No, in the case conference, your colleague confirmed that this could be done by 2015. No, last time at LegCo, we already said that 2015 is unrealistic. We will not be able to make it. You mean 2016 then? They are going in that direction, post 2015. Please do not answer on his behalf. I want an accurate answer. You have become an official chairman. In other words, can you confirm? Because we had a case conference and that was the message you gave us, your colleague gave us. I told you, you need no research. You can even just use an audio tape recorder. You don't need a particular software. We said that time that we could go for different options. One, to use a software to turn speech into text. We believe this is the best for students because the student can modify the answer. Secondly, you tape record it and then we ask people to mark. But we have already said that we have to try this out first. The research report has not come back. I'm not definitely saying no, but when you ask me whether it will be 2015, I would say that what we know now tells us that we will not be able to make it for 2015. Oh, okay, I give some concession. What about 2016? Will depend on what the report says. We'll go in that direction. What about the other questions? Chairman, can you ask him to answer my other questions? Anything to add? DS? The last part about natural science and science subjects, that there are textual problems. I think this has something to do with the design of the curriculum. Many people think that it is not enough for science students just to know how to do the mathematics. Even in junior secondary, there should be textual problems for them to resolve. Well, this is one way to help students tackle problems, and that is why we have factored in more textual problems. No, sorry. Next round, Dr. Helena Wong. Thank you, Chairman. I have to declare that I am a director of PTU. I'm concerned about the liberal studies subject. I know that in the paper, you said you will continue to review it because it's a new subject. In previous meetings, I have mentioned the views of teachers and students saying that the NSS, including liberal studies, do not afford enough time or class time for them to complete the curricula. And a very common phenomenon is that teachers have to find time to give extra lessons before they can complete the curriculum. So, number one, whether the curriculum has too big a scope, especially liberal studies. Secondly, the IES. I understand that after review, you are reducing the report to just one final report instead of two. Many teachers have told us that they have a low viewing of the IES. They say the IES is not fair to students and it does not, in fact, reflect students' ability truly. 68% of teachers responded to a questionnaire saying that cancelling the IES is one of the ways to effectively improve the liberal studies subject. I know your review is going on. I hope you will listen to the views of teachers and students. And then, teachers have told us also that they feel a lot of pressure teaching liberal studies. There is no textbook, and teachers have to make their own materials. They have to follow current affairs. So they are exhausted. How can the Bureau support them? We understand that you gave certain subsidy for the liberal studies subject, so schools can hire teaching assistants to make teaching materials. But then the subsidy has ended and the TAs have been dismissed. And the pressure will then be taken up by teachers. So how can you make improvements? In the PTU study, it is also found that it's very seldom that we can have group teaching in liberal studies. One teacher may have to take care of 30-odd students, so they cannot conduct targeted or dedicated discussion with students. Many teachers say they do not have the resources to do group teaching, and other teachers say the classrooms are not big enough to allow groups to be set up. So, Secretary, how can you help teachers of liberal studies and help students to learn? Secretary, thank you, members. I'd like to answer 2 points, and then I will defer to the DS. Number one, the subsidy. In the past 12 months, we mentioned this on different occasions. At the early stage, when liberal studies was introduced, as you know, many people met up with a lot of difficulties, so it was rolled out, and we also already said that it would just be for a few years. In the process, the teaching materials have been accumulated, and there is more regional support. And in the process of teaching, some of the workload has been reduced. That's the background to the subsidy. Support is now needed on more exchange on different platforms. That is the exchange of teaching materials among teachers. And also, teachers do not have to give independent teaching on all the 6 different prospects. They do not have to repeat it. They can, in fact, teach and involve 3 to 4 aspects. Thank you very much, Secretary. No more time. No more time for the DS. Well, actually, we have already issued very clear guidelines on all 24 subjects. I understand that some of the curriculum is big, like BAFS and also liberal studies, but we have already cut down on the curriculum. Second round. Before we go into the second round, I myself have some questions. Secretary, you are now taking or making a midterm review on the NAS. As our colleagues were saying, students now sit for 1 fewer examination. You have the DSE, and that will be in the place of Hong Kong CEC and also the university entrance examinations. Theoretically, this should have reduced the pressure for students, but then SBA has again put pressure on teachers and students. If you have been in contact with schools, you will know. Just now, Dr. Chan talked about 24 subjects, 4 core, 20 elective. In fact, it is pressure for students whether they make choices or prepare to read these subjects. My question is, in fact, I'd like to know the views of the Secretary. Now you make this midterm review. As some other colleagues said, sometimes teachers cannot complete the curricula like BAFS, and also there are problems with ratio between teachers and students. The NAS is here to stay, right? I'd like to ask the Secretary. Well, yes, you say you will listen to the views of members and sectors, but I will listen to your views as well. What is the direction for this NAS? Thank you, Chairman. That is such an important question. I will have to answer you solemnly. Number one, there are more choices. This is a world trend. So, Chairman, you would support our strengthening of life education, and we are going to start it with secondary schools. This is one of the measures. Secondly, I have had exchanges with ministers of education overseas, and I have seen that they hold this NAS in high regard. From 2009 to 2012, while we launched it, it came with a lot of new initiatives, and certainly we needed to get familiar with it, and graduates, teachers, and students would speak up about the new initiative. And it is true that we think we need to improve on NAS. For example, SBA should be good, but it has given rise to different kinds of workload. And it is found that if we can do some generic review for different subjects at the same time, then we do not have to do SBA on each and every subject. Later on, when we have the first batch of graduates, you will be able to see how well they perform. I have talked to students. I have talked to them when they have entered university, and I can give you an example. In Shanghai, I met 15 students reading first-year university. 4 students told me when I left Shanghai, they said, after coming here, we know liberal studies has given us competitiveness, so please do not take away the subject but improve upon it. Therefore, I believe the direction is correct, but then the methodology can be improved. Which aspects do you think should be improved? 1, workload. 2, we have accumulated experience in the implementation. Say, for example, liberal studies and other subjects. We are already building up the teaching materials. We would promote mutual exchange of the or sharing of the materials. And number 3, we should make more use of technology. Okay, second round. 3 more members, and I'll draw a line there. Deputy Chairman Fernando Zhang and Yu Chong. 2 minutes. 2 questions. Chinese history, whether it is a compulsory subject. The Secretary said it is compulsory for junior secondary, but I don't think so. Chinese history is not a compulsory subject for junior secondary. We can say that Chinese history is a part of the 8 key learning areas, but Chinese history as a subject is not a compulsory subject. I'd like to clarify that.
In my first round of questions, I asked a question about BAFS and the reform, and whether they will be split up into different subjects, and can we be given some timetable? Secretary, thank you for your questions. Chinese history as a part of the contents to be learned is compulsory in secondary 1 to secondary 3, but it's not compulsory as a subject. It's so the teaching of Chinese history as content is compulsory, not as a subject. What is your second question? Will the BAFS be split up into different subjects? Under the revised approach, we'll still cover accounting and business. but there are elective modules for different students. We'll try to see whether this will serve the purpose. It's premature to talk about splitting the subject into different subjects. Is there going to be a discussion, and when will a decision be made? In the midterm review, we have decided to explore the effect of the reforms before we move ahead. Dr. Fernando Zhao, senior secondary education is in the middle of the 3-3-4 structure. It's the middle three. So you must make sure that there's the dovetailing of 3 with the 4. But for SEN students, their chance of getting the 4, the tertiary education, is really remote. So you should look at the role played by the secondary curriculum, and also for some of the SEN students, they are not in your hands. They are regarded as part of adult education, and it's the purview of the social welfare department. Some SEN students may have already reached 18 years of age, but they need to be educated further. Would the Education Bureau take this up with the LWB? Do you want the SEN student to be able to wash cars for people when he graduates, or do you want he to be able to do other things? Well, in the 3-3-4 structure, 3 and 3 belongs to one level, and for the remaining 4, it would have to be supported by other measures. But the tertiary sector admits students of their own accord. It enjoys autonomy. We have a special unit to tackle SEN students' needs. There is a division of labor professionally among the different people and units. Mr. Leung Yu-chung, would you also cover in your review the content of the curriculum and whether the scope is too wide? I agree with Dr. Helena Wong that there's so much to learn and so little time. The Deputy Secretary, we review the subjects as well as the curriculum. We would update or trim the subject curriculum as appropriate. Well, I teach mathematics. The curriculum is the syllabus is so big. Although I do not teach the subject this year. What would you like an answer on mathematics only? Yes. The curriculum of mathematics is under review. Apart from the compulsory section, there's also an extended section. Both are being looked into. But there are other people saying that we're not doing sufficient in the curriculum, and we should cater for the needs of those who are going to be admitted to universities and also those who are not. Well, it's about transfer of knowledge, but we don't have sufficient teaching hours. I don't disagree with you on the point of transferring more or teaching the students to do more. But now you're not asking the teachers and students to do extra lessons during holidays. Well, in terms of lesson hours, Hong Kong is among the places where we have long lesson hours. We have to strike a balance with regard to different needs. All right, we have now move on to the next item, policy and program on redevelopment of primary and secondary schools and special schools. Hands up for those who want to speak on this item, or for this part, I would ask the Deputy Chairman to take the chair. Hands up, please.
而家舉咗手嘅係莫乃光。
We have Mr. Charles Moore, Dr. Kenneth Chan, Dr. Fernando Cheung, Mr. Yu Zhong.
咁啊，大家坐好之後咧，就不如請副局長。
All right, if you are seated, I'll invite the Undersecretary to brief us. Well, all school premises are in compliance with the relevant requirements, but they were built during different times, and so the standards are varied. We will make use of vacant premises, school improvement programs, a major redevelopment and building program to make improvements. We have allocated $8.5 billion to redevelop 63 mainstream schools and 4 special schools. And we have also embarking on 5 repositioning projects. And at the last panel meeting, with your support, one of the subjects, and that is a new block for a Women's Choice School, and also Area 36 with and Kowloon Kai-Tak, Site 5C5, a special school. We have your support to go to the Finance Committee. As I will say, redevelopment, repositioning are subject to a number of factors such as the land supply and the progress of housing projects in the vicinity, the long-term demand and supply, whether the projects are supported by affected students, teachers, and parents, and whether the support of the relevant district councils are secured. The mechanism for the allocation of school premises has been working well. We will continue to make use of the existing mechanism to upgrade the mainstream schools as well as special schools through redevelopment and repositioning. All right, 3 minutes for the members who have indicated a wish to speak. Dr. Charles Moore, in 1998 policy address. Whole day schooling was promised by 2007 and 2008, but still we have 6 schools which have yet to introduce full day schooling. The paper talk about schools are now doing this, but through the questions raised by Mr. Yip Kun Yun, we now know that some primary schools are not be able to do away with bisectional teaching. I have to declare an interest in respect of 2 schools. One I used to study, and one is an associated school of my alma mater. One is Punyu Association Wayan Primary School, and another is the Methodist Primary School. They are both substandard schools. The primary school I went to celebrate the 55th anniversary, and the school premises have remained the same over the years. And of course, there is substandard in provision. There are many constraints, but this site has been left vacant. Nothing has happened. Of course, we are concerned that vacant sites may be grabbed by the government for other purposes. So I hope you can give us some answer. Can you promise, as you have set out in the reply to Mr. Yip Kun Yuen, that in 2014-15 you are going to submit an application to the Finance Committee for funding approval? Are you going to do this? The question is, are you going to do this in 2014-15? Maybe I shouldn't talk about the other schools because Mr. Mok is concerned about the North Point site. We are now in the detailed design stage. Earlier this year, one of the school sponsoring body told us that the design was okay. So what we need to do is to do some detailed design, and then we will secure resources internally and handle some technical issues. Our objective is to strive for the submission of an FC application next year. I hope this is a promise. The students, the school sponsoring bodies, and the students and the teachers have been waiting for so long. But this is a target time. Yes, we need to secure resources internally, but we believe this would be regarded as one of the top priorities. We plan to do it next year. Dr. Kenneth Chan, well, I want to recover some debt. If we take a look at paragraph 94 of the minutes, I asked about school education places in 18 districts and the shortfall and so on and so forth. According to the minutes, the information will be provided after the meeting. Now that we meet again, I just want to remind you of the promise. And according to the Undersecretary, when these school campuses were built, they were up to standards, so they should be okay. They should be able to last for a little bit longer. So, Undersecretary, please provide the data promise. And second debt I want to recover is this. I asked about the old matchbox-like school campuses. One of them is Yuan Estate, Taiwan. But so don't put it on the back burner after we have been talking about it for some time. I understand internal procedure is involved, it's complicated, and securing resources cannot be done overnight. But at least it should be shown on the radar. It should be captured by the radar. And we expect that if we do this, then depending on the individual circumstances of the schools, they will be able to develop in a sustainable manner. So I want to collect two sums, with your permission, Chairman. For the first one, we're doing it. I think even if Dr. Chen doesn't mention it, your secretariat will certainly pursue us to provide the information.
As for the second question, the plan was made for next week, but we'll have to postpone it. We'll find another time to meet Dr. Kenneth Chan on that one. In simple terms, in a housing estate, if people want in situ redevelopment, there will be a big difficulty because the site is limited. As for reprovisioning, it really depends on whether we have the land or vacant school premises. But we will be happy to talk to the school to see what they have in mind before we think about what can be done. Dr. Elena Wong. Thank you, Chairman. I also like to recover some debts. The DP Our Kowloon East, Kowloon West branches have been here to petition. Unfortunately, no one went down to receive the letters. Well, I transferred those letters to the secretary. May I refer to Annex C of this paper? Projects under construction. I'd like to talk about Tet Long and Kai Ching estates. Kai Ching is where there was a gun shooting incident last week. As you know, population intake has started, and we have observed many households are young families with children. Many children have to go to school. The administration has already secured funding for building 2 primary schools. One, Sing Kong Wui, Chao Ting Shan Primary School. It has been moved from the other side. I have been to the old premises, but I can only see piling done on the site. However, people have moved in. They are already living there. So my question is, when you develop new residential areas, why don't you provide schools in tandem? Is it that you have to wait for people to move in and then you start to build the schools? I can only see a construction site there. And it should be completed by September next year for student intake. But I can still see piling being done, and I'm not sure whether you can have the school completed in 2005. Undersecretary, can you help us speed up the project? What is ideal is that you tally the completion of the school with population intake. Right now, people are already living in the estate, but there is no school whatsoever. No kindergarten, no school. Some students have to travel afar to go to school. We were thinking of Yet Sao or Cheng Shan Primary School, but the principals have told us that they have classrooms. However, the education department has not allowed them to increase student places. Now, I think this mismatch in timing is very unsatisfactory. You really have to tally with the pace of new estates development in reprovisioning school. In Kai Tak development area, there should be Canisial College, but we don't know when that will come on stream. You have not asked for funding at all. What are the arrangements? Undersecretary, briefly, please. Dr. Wang mentioned the 2 primary schools. The timetable is still for them to be provided by the end of 2015. We cannot see any major problems or delay, but we are going to watch closely so there will be no delay. Well, planning-wise, of course, the most ideal situation is for the schools to be already there when people move in. But when we came here less than a year ago for funding support, we already said that we were a bit late and we will now move fast. For Yet Sao and Cheng Shan Primary School, it is already accepting some students in the new estate. We have allowed it to operate more classes in the primary school. But at the same time, some schools in Kowloon City still have vacant places. So we can't push all students to the same primary school and not send students to other schools in Kowloon City because, in fact, they belong to the same school net. We have explained this to parents of the 2 estates. We will try our very best to put students in Cheng Shan and Yet Sao because I know parents would like to send children to the nearest school within the estate. Well, okay, time is up. I think this is an important issue, isn't it? Because residents now cannot find a school nearby. Dr. Fernando Zhang. I also want to recover some debts. I, of course, would want to talk about special school. One Ko-Fuk Yiu in wheelchair for physically disabled students. It has been sharing school premises with a mainstream school. In the end, the mainstream school moved out, but the premises are still very unsatisfactory. They would like reprovisioning or in situ redevelopment, but nothing has come out of it. The other one in Tuen Mun. I think many of our colleagues have received many complaints. This is for students with medium mental incapacity. This is very unsatisfactory. A special school has to share school premises with another school. And the two school sponsoring bodies, say for example, in Tuen Mun, we have one for the mildly incapacitated and another one with medium incapacity. And the two schools are so different in facility. And the same can be said about another pair of schools for the physically disabled operated by the same school sponsoring body. We are talking about SEN students, and yet they are given school premises of very different quality. When you consider the different factors, you have not covered the needs of students. For those who are mildly mentally incapacitated, many of them have a certain degree of autism. They need space, and also the physically disabled need more space because they have to be assisted with their mobility. Now my question for you is, when will you be willing to improve school facilities for special schools? Undersecretary, we have done a lot to improve special schools. Starting from 2000, we have reprovisioned or redeveloped 11 special schools, and I think 5 have been given major improvement projects, and altogether that makes up for a quarter of special schools. And there are 37 which have improvement projects being undertaken in them. Don't go back on history. In your paper, there is one vacant special school premises in Tuen Mun. Well, it was not a special school as such, but it was designated a special school. And another one is in Tuen Mun. Will you be redeveloping it for the students? We are talking to it on some improvement measures. As to the usage of this vacant school premises, we are looking at providing new places instead of having a reprovisioning project. We can see the need, and we may have to directly increase places to satisfy existing demand. So planning-wise, we are not providing new services as such. Mr. Liang Yu-chung, the paper says that many schools were up to standard when they were completed. Well, that goes without saying. But times have changed, and you are silent as to whether the schools meet present-day standards. And it seems you are telling us that you will just do your best. But your best is not good enough. School premises have every bearing on teaching. Whether it be mainstream or special schools, I think we face the same problem. You must improve the quality of the premises. Dr. Fernando Zhang talked about special schools. I'd like to talk about the Kwai Chung Lutheran Primary School. We were talking about reprovisioning it in the last session, but nothing has been done. The same can be said for many other schools. They should be reprovisioned. Redevelopment doesn't really work because the site is limited. I hope you will give some thorough thinking to this issue. Number two, I'd like to mention something very wild. I really like to talk about kindergartens while we even do not have enough primary and secondary schools. I think one of the difficulties for providing free kindergarten education is school premises. If you don't do something about school premises, the problem will forever be with us. In Kai Tak, in new areas, why don't you give some thought to setting up new premises for kindergarten so you can start to provide free education? The CE said that he would like to build housing estates in many places. Why don't you also think of providing standard kindergarten premises so that by and by kindergarten education will be included in the 15-year free education? You have to start now. Undersecretary. Let me talk about kindergartens. In Kai Tak, in the two estates, we have already put aside certain space and for kindergarten use. The housing department has put aside the space, and they will go through us in order to provide kindergarten places. We have got some proposals. Now we are vetting the contents of those bits. So planning-wise, if there is a big-scale development, we will put aside space for kindergarten use. As to the long term and what we can do about school premises, the 15-year Free Education Committee is looking into this, and we are awaiting their views. It's my turn, and then Mr. Ip Kwok Him will handle the second round later. I have two questions. Number one, we talked about new large-scale developments, but schools and kindergartens lag behind residential development. In Kai Ching and Tak Long, are these peculiar examples, or is that an example for future large-scale developments? And what is the reason for the time lag? The time lag is not a few months, but a few years. Can you resolve that? I think Hong Kong people are all concerned about this. Number two, as Mr. Leung Yu Chung said, of course the schools were built to standard in the past. But compared to present-day standards, many school premises are not up to par. I have done the calculation. Supposing the standard is 4,000 square meters, there are 34% of primary schools which are not up to par, and secondary schools, the situation is also serious. 71% of them are not up to par. We can see a so-called wealth gap between schools. Some schools are really luxurious. Dr. Fernando Zhang said that it's like heaven and hell. What is the long-term direction for bridging that wealth gap amongst schools by, of course, enhancing the poor ones? These two are major questions.
Well, unless I can build all the schools in 1 year. If I build them in 10 years or 20 years, then there will be a time difference between the first one and the last one. There will be a gap of 10 to 20 years. So when you compare the last one with the first one, of course, the first one looks bad. But why don't you answer my first question? I think for the first question, you need a lot of time to ponder over the completion of new housing estates and the new schools and the time gap. Our objective is to have the two occurring at the same time. Why is there a time gap? Chairman, if I may, I would like to give you a detailed reply. We're talking about two projects, and between two projects, there may be a difference in completion time. It's possible that the school project will be completed ahead of that of the housing estate. In this case, the difference is a year or more than a year. But for Qingshan and Yashao primary schools, they are admitting students. There are other schools in Kowloon City. Of course, the objective is to have both the school and the housing estate ready at the same time. Our meeting time is up. I would like to extend the meeting by no more than 15 minutes so that we can finish our business. Mr. Yip Kok Him. Hong Kong is an affluent society. We should give our children the best possible campuses so that they can learn effectively. On the 19th of March, you reply some of our special FC questions. Then that is up to March 2014. Some 228 schools are not yet. There are 228 which are up to the required standards. How many are not yet up to the standards? Can you give us a number? If we are to upgrade all of them, how much time, how much money is involved? And also in Annex C, you want to build 5 new schools costing $2 billion. So a primary school or secondary school, what is the reasonable construction cost at money of the day levels? And also there are 11 schools waiting to be redeveloped or reprovisioned. But this year we are going to see 2 having funding applications covered and submitted to this council for consideration. How many more can be done? If I remember correctly, we were talking about a primary school in North District. It's 390 million or a little bit under $400 million. But it's different with different schools. For the North District primary school, they need to widen a row. So on average, it's about $300 million. And that's certainly the case with those to be constructed in Kai Tak. And how many schools are not up to the modern day standards? It's difficult to bring them all up to modern or present standards. For example, you may have a counseling rooms, or you may have bigger staff room for teachers. In older schools, they may have similar rooms, but of smaller sizes. And it's sometimes, technically speaking, it's impossible to bring them up to present-day standards. Over the years, we have done a lot of redevelopment and reprovisioning projects. We started to do the school improvement program in 1994. So altogether, 300 schools have been benefited, and only 100 or so have never been benefited from the program. And we'll certainly cover more in our redevelopment projects. Anyone for the second round? All right, one member, 3 minutes. You have the last word. I want to thank Mr. Leung Yu-chung for asking a question about the kindergarten in Kai Tak. You have to make sure that you have sufficient number of places for children living there. And also in Kowloon East, where we have the Anderson Road project. According to the schedule, there are 2 schools, 1 primary and 1 secondary, but they have not been allocated. The Deputy Chairman asked you a question, whether the Education Bureau has built in a systemic deferral system or postponement system in new development areas. And so to the extent that there will be a wait of 2 or 3 years after population intake before you have any schools. If you don't have this systemic problem, please pay attention to that Anderson Road development project. The government has given the housing department $2.6 billion to build a housing estate there called On That Estate. There will be 23 blocks of PRH. It's bigger in scale than Ka-lok and Tak-lok. And the 2 will be super tall blocks, 45 stories, 16,000 units to be commissioned starting from 2016. But you haven't allocated the size for school sponsoring bodies at Anderson Road. How can you make sure that when people move into the Anderson Road housing estates, they can send their children to a school nearby? So are we going to see a repeat of Ka-lok and Tak-lok in that the school projects will be subject to delays? Within this year, we can allocate the 2 school sites at Anderson Road, and then we'll start to talk to the schools on the design. Once the design is ready, we'll come back to this council to secure funding approval. The construction period is about 2 to 3 years, and then it will be completed. When we look at the provision of school places, we look at the whole district as a whole. Where would those new residents come from? Would they be moving from Kwun Tong instead of from another district, so that the demand for school places will not be additional to what they are requiring now? Of course, we don't want to see students traveling a long trip to go to school. We want them to spend their time better on studying. Well, the housing department's plan is already there. Funding has been approved. They are constructing the housing blocks, and the blocks will be completed in 2015 and to 2016. We're now in the middle of 2014, so I ask you approximately when you can come back to seek approval to make sure that there will not be a big time gap between the completion of school projects and population move-in. We have to talk to the school sponsoring body over the design. It would depend on what they would like to do, special things they want to do, and what their vision and mission is. They may require special things. If it's a standard school, that is, they don't require anything special, and the site is a normal site, we can certainly move on as quickly as we can. That's all I can say. We'll move ahead as soon as we can. There's not a timetable. The housing department has a timetable. You can't say that you don't have a timetable for schools there. Maybe I can refer to a usual time frame. I don't want to be seen that I have promised to deliver anything within a certain time frame. I think a design can be completed normally within a year, and that would secure the resources. We would come to this council to get approval. All right, so members will have to keep a close watch over the matters. I know you are the debt-ridden Education Bureau. Please don't continue to incur more debts so that people can get what they want. All right, AOB, nothing under AOB, so meeting's adjourned.